In this video, I will analyze and comment on one of my favorite poems from the First World War, from one of my favorite World War I poets, Anthem for Doomed Youth by Wilfred Owen. This poem is a sonnet. It was written in 1917. Let's read it first. Anthem for Doomed Youth by Wilfred Owen. What passing bells for these who die as cattle? Only the monstrous anger of the guns. Only the stuttering rifle's rapid rattle can patter out their hasty orisons. No mockeries now for them, no prayers nor bells, nor any voice of mourning save the choirs, the shrill demented choirs of wailing shells, and bugles calling for them from sad shires. What candles may be held to speed them all? Not in the hands of boys, but in their eyes shall shine the holy glimmers of goodbyes. The pallor of girls' brows shall be their pall, their flowers the tenderness of patient minds, and each slow dusk the drawing down of blinds. An anthem is a song whose functions are to evoke strong emotion, foster a sense of belonging, inspire collective action, or reflection among those who sing it. This poem is an anthem for doomed youth. It's a song for the young men who were sent to the trenches of Belgium and France in the First World War, many of whom were destined to die, and what has been called the meat grinder of the Western Front. The first stanza starts with a question. What passing bells for these who die as cattle? Village bells in England were rung for various reasons. Rung one way, they were a call to the faithful to start making their way to church on Sunday. Rung another way, they would be an alarm bell. Another way, they were bells of celebration, say for a wedding. Passing bells were bells of mourning, to announce a death or a funeral. For these who die as cattle is a loaded metaphor. I ask my students how cattle die. Many of them are farmers, they know. They usually come up with a pretty good list. The cattle that we slaughter are young and in their prime. They die in large quantities. Their death accomplishes nothing of any significance. They are innocent and oblivious to what is happening. Their death lacks dignity. Their slaughter is systematic. They die easily and don't stand a chance. They die without glory and honor, and they are unremembered. This, by the way, is a great lesson on one aspect of the power of poetry. It's very condensed. All these things are packed into a very short, simple simile. Die as cattle. Anyway, the speaker is asking a question. When people die, they are supposed to have passing bells rung on their behalf. Where are the bells for these young soldiers? The next two lines start with the word only. The speaker says that they get no bells, and what they get instead is completely inadequate for the commemoration of the dead. They get no bells. They get instead monstrous anger of the guns and the stuttering rifle's rapid rattle. The big artillery guns and machine guns were the biggest killers of First World War soldiers on the Western Front. You can hear the sounds of the machine guns in those lines with all that alliteration and consonants. It's onomatopoeia. Cattle, stuttering, rattle, patter. What, are there 9 R sounds in 3 lines? You can hear the sounds of the battlefield, sounds with which Owen had first-hand experience. In their death, these young men should receive the honor of passing bells, and thoughtful prayers, not hasty orisons. They deserve a voice of mourning, and songs that aren't the shrill demented choirs of wailing shells. They should receive mockeries. I've always had trouble with the word mockeries. I know it sounds like mocking, but that doesn't make sense in this context. It's clearly a thing that these men deserve, and it's also part of a proper funeral. The speaker is angry that they're not receiving mockeries or prayers or bells. I have made the assumption that it's a regional term for something like a eulogy, but if you know better, please let us all know in the comments. From a sound perspective, mockeries is a great word, because it has the K sound and another R sound, which contribute to the overall cacophonous sound and the angry tone that the speaker is expressing in the octave, the 8-line part of this sonnet. The octave ends with the military sound of bugles, but these call them from sad shires, from the little counties back home. The sound of this line is different than the first 7. It's quieter, softer, and sadder, and it provides a transition to the much more euphonious sestet, the 6-line part of this sonnet. In the sestet, we've changed locations. The octave takes place on the battlefield, and the cacophonous sounds give us both a sense of place and the anger of the speaker. These go together nicely. The sestet takes place back home with the loved ones who profoundly experience the loss of these young men. These lines too begin with a question, but the speaker is feeling or mirroring the sadness of the friends and families who are unable to honor these young men with the traditional funeral. The speaker asks, where are the funeral candles? There are none held by altar boys in the traditional Anglican service. Instead, we have the glimmer in the tear-filled eyes of the younger brothers or sons of the fallen. Instead of the white pall, the sheet that would traditionally cover the coffin, we have the pale faces of the girls, the sisters, wives, daughters, girlfriends. With no funeral, there are no flowers. Instead, we have the tender thoughts of the parents, These thoughts are patient. No doubt there were times when the mothers were impatient with the boys who trampled mud into the kitchen or exhibited bad manners at the table, but all that is forgotten. They remember all the good things about the sons who will never return home. Read the whole poem out loud, on your own, and you will hear all sorts of ways that the first 8 lines sound and feel different than the last 6. As the author sings of the doomed youth with anger and sadness, the last line too is full of appropriate sounds. The D's and the L's, along with the imagery, communicate a sense of loss, that with no body, they have no eyes to close. All they have is the drawing down of blinds as they turn inward toward their private grief. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.